I remember the exact tingle of unease rippling down my spine the moment I glanced at her fitness app and realized the motion tracker had gone dead an hour before her yoga class supposedly finished. Until that second, I'd never considered how a single digital reading could make my heart pound so violently, my thoughts spiraling in all directions. And yet there I was, standing in our kitchen, phone in hand, staring at that mocking timestamp, 6 p.m. The yoga studio schedule said the session ran until 7. She, my girlfriend Naomi, had been raving about how intense the stretches were, how she might come home sore and exhausted. But the data in front of me suggested something else entirely. It whispered a silent question: where was she really, once her tracker stopped moving at 6? I've always believed I'm a calm, rational person. My friends call me steady, unflappable even, the kind of guy who rarely panics in a crisis. I handle finances for a mid-size company. My entire professional life revolves around analyzing data, noticing anomalies, and resolving them without drama. But nothing had prepared me for the suspicion that my own partner might be hiding something. And so, as I remained in our tidy apartment, phone pressed to my chest, I felt an unfamiliar swell of dread and heartbreak. That sliver of data had become a puzzle piece in a game I never wanted to play, a game of trust, secrets, and painful discoveries. I had no clue that my quest for answers would lead me down a path far darker and more complicated than any scenario I'd conjured in my mind. Naomi and I had been together for almost 3 years. We met the old-fashioned way, through mutual friends at a casual house party. She wore a bohemian-style skirt, arms full of thin copper bracelets that jingled every time she gestured while talking. Her laughter was light and infectious. I was drawn to her energy, the way she seemed to fill a room with that warm, creative aura. Where I was methodical and grounded, she was spontaneous and open-hearted. That difference, I thought, made us fit perfectly. We balanced each other. For most of our relationship, we'd been honest about our daily routines. We'd text about grocery lists, plan weekend hikes, bicker about whose turn it was to vacuum. Life felt comfortably normal. There were no glaring signs of trouble. Even in the weeks leading up to the discovery, as I'd later call it, things seemed relatively calm. Maybe we'd both been a bit busier than usual. She'd recently enrolled in a new membership at a boutique yoga studio that specialized in hot yoga, deep stretching classes, that sort of thing. She claimed it was the best stress relief imaginable, especially after her transition to a more demanding role at her design firm. I remember the day she came home beaming about the studio's flexible schedule. She said she could pop in for a 5:30 or 6 o'clock session after work. They have a class that ends at 7, she told me, so I'll be back a bit after that. Maybe 7:30 if I stay to chat with the instructor. Of course I believed her. Why wouldn't I? And so it became routine. Naomi would gather her yoga mat, slip into comfortable leggings, and head out around 5:15, smiling with that subtle anticipation of a good workout. She'd return around 7:45 or so, often glowing with that post-exercise flush. She'd claim the class ran over, or that she'd lingered for an extra stretch. I rarely questioned her. In fact, I loved her newfound enthusiasm for fitness, especially since she said it helped her stress levels. But then came that evening, Tuesday, to be exact, when I decided to fiddle with the fitness tracker app we'd both installed months earlier. It was one of those couples-friendly health apps that allowed us to share certain metrics: steps, active minutes, heart rate, etc. Nothing invasive, just a fun way to motivate each other. I was trying to confirm how many steps I'd logged that day, and on a whim, I tapped Naomi's profile. That was when I noticed the data: her activity flatlined at 6 p.m. Not just a decrease, total inactivity, as though the device had been removed or turned off. Yet she told me she'd left for yoga at 5:15 and wouldn't be done until 7. The discrepancy was small but glaring. If she was truly in a yoga class, I'd expect some movement recorded at least until 7, especially since yoga doesn't typically register as zero movement on a device. There should be a few spikes in heart rate or motion data from transitions between poses. Even if she took off the device during class, the timing was suspicious. She'd claimed the class ended an hour later. At first, I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe her device's battery died mid-class. Maybe the Bluetooth connection dropped. But as I scrolled through previous days, I noticed a pattern. On multiple occasions, the data ended an hour or more before she was supposedly finished with yoga. The tension in my chest mounted, a creeping sense of betrayal that I fought to suppress. I tried not to panic. After all, it could still be a glitch. But that night, when Naomi returned around 7:45, I carefully asked how class was. She smiled, sank onto the couch, claiming she'd had a challenging final pose that left her arms shaking. We ended right at 7, she said casually, but I stuck around to chat with Sasha, the instructor, and a couple of the other students. You know, standard yoga talk. Then I showered there. Her story was plausible. Perfectly so. But the difference between 7 and 6 was a gaping hole in my mind. I forced a light laugh. That's nice, I said. So the class definitely ended at 7, huh? She furrowed her brow slightly. Yes, that's the schedule. A chill went through me. Why was she lying? Or was she? Perhaps the device malfunction was to blame. I resolved to check the next time she went. That was 2 days later. Again, the tracker died at 5:58 p.m., well before the official class end time of 7. That time, I felt my breath catch in my throat when I saw the data. Something was amiss. In relationships, it's terrifying how one small suspicion can snowball. I found myself replaying her little white lies or inconsistencies from the past few weeks, like the time she said she was too tired to meet me for dinner after yoga because the class had run extra late, but she posted a social media story from 8 p.m. wearing different clothes than her yoga outfit. Then I recalled how she sometimes smelled more like perfume than sweat when she came home, or how she once claimed the studio's showers were amazing, but I'd visited that place once, to drop off her wallet, and saw nothing special about their modest facilities. Everywhere I looked, puzzle pieces seemed to form a picture of deception. One Friday night, about a week into my discovery, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I'd follow her. The plan was simple. I'd watch her leave for her 5:30 class, then give her a few minutes, hop into my own car, and drive to the yoga studio. If she was truly there, I'd see her car in the lot, or at least see her entering. If not, well, that confirmed something else was going on. She left around 5:15, wearing her usual leggings and a loose tank, yoga mat slung over her shoulder. She gave me a quick kiss, saying she'd see me around 7:45 or 8. My stomach clenched as I feigned normalcy. The moment she closed the door, I grabbed my keys and phone, heart pounding. I pulled out of our driveway, trying to keep a good distance in case she was vigilant. But she didn't seem to suspect a thing. She drove away, presumably in the direction of the yoga studio. I arrived at the studio's parking lot a few minutes behind her. My eyes darted around for her car, an older blue hatchback. It wasn't there. The lot was fairly small, maybe 20 spaces, none of them occupied by anything resembling her hatchback. My heart hammered. Could she have parked somewhere else? I circled the block. No sign of her car on the street. I double-checked the posted signs. She wouldn't have needed to park far away, as plenty of spots were open. So she wasn't there. My breath came in shallow bursts. Where had she gone? A swirl of emotions welled inside me. Fear, anger, heartbreak. I considered storming inside to check the sign-in sheet. Maybe she'd arrived with a friend or used a different entrance. But the empty parking lot was telling enough. She was not attending yoga. She'd been lying to me for weeks. Numbly, I drove home, a million possibilities rattling in my mind. Was she seeing someone else? Maybe meeting a co-worker for some clandestine relationship? My rational side told me to stay calm, gather more facts before confronting her. My emotional side was screaming to call her out immediately, demand to know the truth. But I forced patience. This was a delicate scenario, and if I wanted genuine answers, I needed a plan. I started small. That night, I didn't mention my excursion. When she came home around 7:50, I asked about her class casually. She spun the same story. The instructor introduced a new sequence, they chatted, she used the steam room. Her voice was calm, not a hint of guilt in her eyes. It was almost chilling how effortlessly she lied. The next step felt like a betrayal, but I saw no other way. I rummaged through her gym bag when she was in the shower. It was a hasty search. I found a yoga mat, yes, but it looked nearly unused. The edges were pristine, no hint of sweat or wear. That was odd if she was truly doing hot yoga multiple times a week. Her yoga clothes also smelled faintly of laundry detergent, not sweat. Almost as if they'd never been worn, or she'd just laundered them without wearing them. I stuffed everything back as best I could, my heart pounding with guilt and suspicion. That weekend, I looked up the yoga studio schedule online, noticing that indeed they had a 5:30 to 7 p.m. class. Could it be she was going to a different location or a different class? Possibly. But the studio's website listed only one building in our city. The simplest explanation was that she wasn't going there at all. By now, I was consumed by the question, where was she going? And why use yoga as a cover? I tried to glean more from her phone. We'd never hidden passcodes from each other, but rummaging through her personal device felt like crossing a line. Still, The suspicion was eating me alive. One Sunday, while she was out grocery shopping, I found her phone on the kitchen counter. She'd left it unlocked. My pulse thundered in my ears. With shaking hands, I opened her call log, messages, and location history. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't see any other route to the truth. Her texts were surprisingly sparse, mostly mundane conversations with co-workers about design projects, a few friends discussing weekend plans, a short exchange with her mother about an upcoming family gathering. Nothing even remotely incriminating. Her call history was similarly normal: my number, her best friends, a few business calls. My suspicion soared when I realized there was no mention of yoga or suspicious rendezvous. Could she be using a separate messaging app? Then I checked her location history. It was turned off. That was unusual. We used to keep location services on for convenience with certain apps. Had she disabled it to hide something? My stomach turned. I put the phone down, feeling dirty and ashamed, but also more certain that something big was being concealed. The tension between us grew noticeable even without direct confrontation. She seemed more distracted, often burying her face in her phone or stepping out to take calls in private. The once easy affection in our apartment became strained. I'd catch her eye and see flickers of guilt or worry, as though she sensed my building distrust. At last, I decided I had to confront her, but carefully. One night, I invited her to sit with me on the couch. The TV was off, the lamps casting warm light over our living room. I reached for her hand, noticing how she flinched slightly. We both knew a conversation was coming. "Naomi," I began quietly, "I need to talk to you about something important." She swallowed, nodding. "Sure. What's on your mind?" I took a measured breath. "I've noticed your fitness tracker data. It stops logging movement around 6, even though your yoga class is until 7. I also realized your car isn't at the studio when you say you're there." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw raw panic in her expression. Then she forced a soft laugh. You followed me? That's a bit extreme, don't you think?" Hearing her deflect only heightened my frustration. "I'm sorry if it's extreme, but you gave me reasons to doubt. The yoga mat looks barely used. Your clothes don't smell like you exercised. You keep showing up with these stories about class running late. Naomi, I know you're lying. I just want to know why." She blinked rapidly, tears forming in her eyes. "Why are you snooping on me? Don't you trust me?" The painful irony of her question nearly made me laugh. Instead, I said, "I did trust you. But your words and the facts aren't matching up. I'm scared, Naomi. Scared that you're hiding something big, something that might end us. Please, just tell me the truth. Are you seeing someone else?" She stiffened, tears sliding down her cheeks. "No. I'm not cheating. I swear." "Then what is it?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Please, I can't live with these secrets." For a long moment, she looked torn, anguish carved into her features. Finally, she whispered, I can't tell you. Not yet." She broke down into sobs, burying her face in her hands. The pit in my stomach yawned wider. "Naomi, that's not fair. You're basically confirming you have a secret, but you won't share. This is ripping me apart." She shook her head, voice muffled by her hands. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But I'm not ready to explain. Just know I'm not cheating, and it's not about you. It's my problem." I stared at her, at a loss. She was giving me nothing. Eventually, I got up and wandered into the bedroom, leaving her there. We didn't speak much the rest of the night. I lay awake, hearing her soft cries from the living room. My mind churned, conjuring all manner of scenarios. Could she be in trouble, financial, legal, medical? Was she tangled in some shady business? The frustration of not knowing gnawed at me like a persistent ache. Over the next few days, we lived like polite strangers, exchanging minimal words, each coexisting in the same space but separated by a wall of secrecy. I debated telling friends or family, seeking advice, but I felt too embarrassed. I imagined how the conversation would go. "Hey, so my girlfriend pretends to attend yoga classes that end at 7, but her fitness tracker stops at 6, and I followed her, discovering she's not there." It sounded like a soap opera. My pride wouldn't let me air that dirty laundry yet. Instead, I grew more desperate for the truth. One afternoon, I tried calling the yoga studio under the guise of verifying membership info. The receptionist found Naomi's account, said she'd purchased a monthly pass. She had only attended a couple of classes in the last month. So she did sign up, but rarely used it. The final puzzle piece, the classes she'd attended ended at 5:15, not 7, so they wouldn't match her stories anyway. She was obviously using the membership as a cover. Armed with that knowledge, I confronted her again, demanding honesty. She erupted in tears, apologizing but still insisting she couldn't reveal the real reason. She pleaded for more time, said she'd fix everything soon. That night, I slept on the couch, feeling heartbreak welling in my chest like a tidal wave. Days turned to a week, then 2, with no resolution. We existed in a limbo of tension and half-truths. My job performance slipped. I found it hard to concentrate on spreadsheets when my personal life was in tatters. She looked perpetually stressed, dark circles under her eyes. Once I overheard her on the phone, whispering, "I'm trying, but I need more time," in a trembling voice. When she noticed me in the doorway, she quickly hung up, looking guilty. I almost lost it then, but forced myself to walk away. Eventually, the strain became too great. One Wednesday evening, I told her I couldn't keep living like this. "Naomi," I said, pacing the living room, "I love you, but if you can't trust me enough to share what's going on, maybe we need a break. I can't keep wondering every day if you're with another man or if you're entangled in something dangerous." Her face crumpled. "Please, don't. I swear I'm not with someone else. It's not criminal. It's just complicated." "Explain it," I practically begged. "We can handle complicated together." She stared at me for a long time, tears in her eyes. "All right," she whispered. "Tomorrow, I'll show you. But you have to promise you'll keep an open mind and not judge me too harshly." I was stunned. "You'll show me? Show me what?" She just nodded, wiping her tears. "Meet me at the place I go to at 6. I'll text you an address. You can follow me if you want. Then you'll see everything." My heart thundered. Relief, fear, confusion, so many emotions. But at least she was offering some clarity. "Okay," I agreed, voice trembling. "I promise I'll try to be understanding." She exhaled shakily. "Then tomorrow it is." That next day was one of the longest of my life. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for her promised text. Finally, around 5:10 p.m., she sent an address with a short message, "Please come at 6 o'clock. Don't be late." The location was about a 20-minute drive from our apartment, in a part of town I rarely visited. My nerves buzzed. At 5:45, I drove out, hands sweaty on the steering wheel. The address led me to a small side street lined with modest storefronts and older apartments overhead. I found a parking spot. The building I needed was an unremarkable gray structure with tinted windows. No signage, nothing to identify it. My mind spun with possibilities. Maybe it was a therapist's office or some kind of clinic. At exactly 6, I approached the door. It was locked, but then Naomi appeared inside and pressed a buzzer to let me in. She looked pale, eyes red, as though she'd been crying. Without a word, she motioned for me to follow down a narrow hallway. My stomach twisted. Was I about to discover something unimaginable, like a secret support group for trauma survivors, or a questionable business dealing? At the end of the hallway, we stepped into a small room. It resembled a private waiting area with a few chairs, potted plants, soft overhead lighting. A single door led to another section. Naomi turned to me, tears glistening. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to lie, but I didn't know how else to cope." I braced myself. "See, cope with what?" Before she could answer, the door opened, and an older woman stepped out. She had kind eyes, lines across her face that hinted at a gentle nature. She glanced at Naomi, then at me. "Hello," she said softly. "You must be the boyfriend. Naomi's told me a bit about you." I blinked, confused. Hi. And you are?" The woman offered a sad smile. "My name's Beatrice. I run this center. We help individuals with borderline personality disorder, anxiety, self-harm, various mental health struggles. She's been coming here for a specialized therapy group." My mind reeled. Therapy group. I echoed, stunned. So the yoga was a cover for group therapy? Naomi's tears spilled over. "I couldn't tell you. I was so ashamed. My anxiety's been out of control. I started having panic attacks at work. I felt like I was failing. Then I found this program. It meets from 6 to 7:30, but I was too scared to let you know I was in therapy. I thought you'd see me as broken or weak, so I pretended it was yoga." My chest tightened in both relief and heartbreak. She was dealing with a mental health crisis in secret. "Oh my God, Naomi, I breathed, pulling her into my arms. She sobbed against my chest. I felt wave after wave of emotion, guilt for suspecting an affair, sorrow that she'd felt too ashamed to confide in me, and an overwhelming sense of love. Beatrice gently placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder. She's made progress, but she's been terrified of you finding out, she explained softly. We encourage openness with loved ones, but she needed to do it at her own pace. I clung to Naomi, tears in my own eyes. Why didn't you trust me? I whispered. I would never judge you for struggling. She shook her head, voice choked. I grew up in a household where mental health was never acknowledged. My parents saw therapy as weakness. You're always so put together. I thought you'd see me differently if you knew I was so broken. I pressed my forehead to hers. You are not broken. And I'm so sorry I doubted you, followed you. I was scared you were slipping away from me. She sighed, burying her face in my shoulder. I know. It's all my fault for lying. But I was petrified of your reaction. My anxiety made me imagine the worst possible scenarios. I gently rubbed her back, trying to soothe her trembling. The tension that had built for weeks slowly ebbed, replaced by a deep sense of relief that the truth, while difficult, was far from the catastrophic scenarios I'd imagined. Eventually, Beatrice suggested Naomi show me around. She led me through the door into a modest group therapy room, cushioned chairs arranged in a circle, soft music playing, motivational posters on the walls. A quiet corner with a small table offered tissues, water, and journals. Naomi explained they do breathing exercises, share personal challenges, and learn coping mechanisms for anxiety and panic disorders. The sessions ended around 7:30, sometimes earlier if the group was small. That's why the fitness tracker data ended at 6, she said, voice trembling. I'd turn it off or leave it in my bag so no one would see I was broadcasting from here. Then I'd come home around 7:45 or 8, telling you it was yoga. I even sprayed myself lightly with water or changed clothes to appear like I'd sweated. I feel so stupid. I squeezed her hand. You're not stupid. You're hurting, and you needed help. I'm only upset you felt you had to do it in secret. Naomi started crying again, tears of relief and regret. I was so sure you'd think less of me. I've never told anyone outside this group that I have panic attacks that sometimes lead to self-harm thoughts. I can't handle the idea of letting you down. My own tears stung my eyes. You're not letting me down. I love you. We'll get through this together. She wrapped her arms around me, and for a moment, we just held each other, letting the quiet hush of the therapy center envelop us. My heart ached at the thought of how alone she must have felt, sneaking off every week to battle her demons. Yet it also filled with hope that now we could face them as a team. Eventually, we parted, and she introduced me to another group member who'd just arrived for the evening session. The woman smiled warmly, giving me a knowing nod, as if to say, it's good you're here supporting her. Then Naomi walked me back outside, where we lingered by my car. She asked if I wanted to wait until the session finished at 7:30 so we could drive home together. Only if you're comfortable with that, I said gently. I don't want to intrude. This is your space. She managed a small smile. I think I'm ready for you to be part of it. That night, I waited in the small reception area, reading a magazine, my emotions still a whirlwind. At 7:30, she emerged, eyes puffy but smiling. We drove home, talking quietly. She explained how her anxiety worsened after a big project at her design firm, how she'd begun having panic attacks in the bathroom at work. She found this therapy group by chance, realized the times conflicted with our usual dinners. She feared I'd ask questions. Over time, the lie about yoga classes became more elaborate. The more she lied, the harder it was to come clean. That in turn fueled her anxiety, creating a vicious cycle. She felt trapped, ashamed. I listened, my heart heavy with empathy. When we arrived home, we sat on the couch, holding hands. She apologized profusely for the weeks of deception. I told her I wished she'd been honest sooner, but I also understood the stigma around mental health could be paralyzing. We decided that, moving forward, we'd attend therapy sessions together occasionally, or at least talk openly about her progress. The yoga membership would be cancelled, she joked, or maybe she'd actually start going for real. We both laughed weakly, grateful to find humor in the aftermath of so much tension. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our apartment shifted significantly. The dark cloud of suspicion lifted. Naomi began opening up about her anxiety triggers, the coping strategies she was learning in the group. She let me see the workbook assigned by the therapist, read a few passages about panic disorder. I asked questions, trying to educate myself so I could be more supportive. Yet, healing wasn't an overnight process. There were still moments when we'd fall into old habits, she'd clam up, or I'd get paranoid if she was late returning from somewhere. But each time, we reminded ourselves that we'd promised honesty. Gradually, we built new routines. She'd show me her progress chart from therapy, and I'd let her see how relieved I was that she was working through her fears openly. One day, Naomi suggested we go to a real yoga class together, not the non-existent 5:37 one but an actual beginner-friendly session at a different studio. Might as well try it honestly now, she said, half smiling. I agreed, finding the idea oddly poetic. We scheduled a Saturday morning class, showing up in standard yoga attire. The instructor led us through a gentle flow. Naomi was a bit wobbly, me even more so. Between shaky poses, we exchanged grins, each acknowledging the irony that we were now doing the thing she'd pretended to do for weeks. After class, we wandered to a nearby coffee shop. Over cappuccinos, Naomi told me she felt lighter than she had in months. It's still terrifying to be vulnerable, she said, but at least I'm not lying about it. I reached across the table, lacing my fingers through hers. We can handle this, together. No more secrets. Her eyes lit with gratitude. No more secrets, she echoed. The next few months brought incremental improvement. Naomi's therapy group ended up being a pivotal resource. She continued seeing a personal counselor as well, tackling the deeper roots of her anxiety. Meanwhile, I attended some sessions as a supportive partner, learning about healthy communication. We discovered better ways to handle conflict, to express concerns without letting them fester into suspicion and fear. Sometimes we laughed at the memory of how it all started, a single snippet of data on a fitness tracker that ended an hour too soon. Yet that snippet opened a window into her hidden world of panic and shame. In a twisted way, I was grateful for the technology that first signaled the discrepancy. Without it, how much longer might she have endured her secret struggles alone? Perhaps it was fate. One evening, months after everything came to light, I was preparing dinner while Naomi tidied up her old yoga paraphernalia. She emerged from the bedroom, mat in hand, eyes shining with a gentle nostalgia. "This thing caused so much trouble," she said with a faint grin, rolling it up carefully. "Maybe I should use it for actual yoga now that I don't have to lie anymore." I smiled, stirring the pasta sauce. Might be a good plan. She set the mat down, stepped over to me, and wrapped her arms around my waist. I turned off the stove and pulled her close. Her hair smelled like jasmine, and I breathed in the familiar scent that once carried an undercurrent of suspicion. Now, it felt comforting, a reminder of how far we'd come. "You know," she said softly, pressing her cheek against my chest, "there were moments I was sure you'd leave me once you found out I'd been lying. That I was a broken mess who couldn't handle life." I kissed the top of her head. "You're not broken. You're human. And I'm not going anywhere. Love means dealing with each other's flaws, right?" She sniffled, tears threatening again, though these were tears of gratitude. "Right." We ate dinner together, laughing at silly jokes, talking about our future plans. The tension that once clung to every corner of our apartment had vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of closeness. We were forging a new kind of bond, one tempered by adversity, strengthened by shared vulnerability. Of course, not every day was perfect. Her anxiety still reared its head sometimes. I still felt echoes of the old suspicion if she came home late, but then I'd remember her courage in sharing her struggles, and the fear would subside. She showed me she trusted me by letting me see her darkest moments, and I reciprocated by respecting her boundaries, not prying but being present whenever she needed support. Eventually, Naomi decided to be even more open about her mental health. She told a few close friends the truth, explaining that she'd started therapy for anxiety. She even brought her mother into the loop, something she'd avoided for years due to fear of judgment. To her surprise, her mother was supportive, if a bit awkward about it. Naomi realized then that the shame she carried was far heavier in her own mind than in reality. One day, she told me she wanted to share her story at a mental health awareness event at her design firm. She asked if I'd stand beside her while she spoke to her co-workers. It was a short speech about the importance of seeking help, how she used to hide her struggles, and how it nearly cost her a loving relationship. Her voice shook at first, but as she continued, she spoke with remarkable clarity. I watched from the side, pride filling my chest. This was the same woman who once lied about yoga classes out of sheer terror of being judged. Now, she was standing before an audience, bravely sharing her truth. When it was over, she joined me, breathless and trembling, but smiling. We embraced, ignoring the small crowd around us. "You did amazing," I whispered, kissing her forehead. She nodded, tears of relief. "And I couldn't have done it without you." I squeezed her hand, gratitude washing over me. We'd come so far from those nights of unanswered questions, from the heartbreak of discovering she wasn't at the yoga studio. The memory of those tense days still stung, but it also reminded us of what we overcame together. Later that evening, we sat on our living room floor, rewatching an old favorite movie. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt the softness of her hair. In the glow of the television, I thought about how close we'd been to unraveling. The lies, the secrecy, my paranoia, it all threatened to break us. And yet, we found our way back. Love sometimes thrives not in the absence of conflict, but in the willingness to heal after damage has been done. She turned to me, a curious sparkle in her eye. "You know, if we'd never installed that fitness tracker app, you might have never found out." I smirked. "True. Or at least not so quickly. But I'm glad I did. Even though it was painful." She exhaled softly. "Me too, actually. Hiding in shame was suffocating me." I stroked her arm gently. "No more hiding. If anything happens, any slip, any crisis, just tell me. We'll handle it together, okay?" She nodded. "Okay." And so we continued, day by day, building a relationship rooted in deeper honesty. We remained vigilant about her anxiety, celebrating every small triumph, from her staying calm through a busy day at work to her bravely traveling solo for a design conference. I learned to be a supportive partner, listening without judgment when she described her worries, reminding her she wasn't alone. Sometimes, late at night, I still marvel at how the entire crisis began with a single piece of data, a fitness tracker line that flatlined at 6 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. Such a tiny detail, yet it tore open a gateway to truths that ultimately saved us. I realize now that if she'd confided in me earlier, the trauma of secrecy might have been avoided. But I also recognize the weight of stigma that held her back. Fear is a potent force, convincing us that those we love most will reject our vulnerabilities. Looking back, I recall the dread I felt rummaging through her gym bag, the shock of an empty parking lot at the yoga studio, the trembling in her voice when I confronted her. Those memories feel surreal now, replaced by a gentler understanding that we're all fighting battles, some more hidden than others. Naomi's battle was internal, shaped by anxiety and fear of judgment. Mine was external, shaped by suspicion and heartbreak. Meeting in the middle meant letting our guard down, trusting that love was stronger than shame. In a sense, the story of how her yoga class ended at 7, but her fitness tracker stopped moving at 6, is less about deception and more about the illusions we create to protect ourselves from perceived rejection. Naomi believed I'd see her differently if I knew she was struggling mentally. I believed she was betraying me physically. In the end, the truth was simpler yet infinitely more complex. She was battling her own mind, lonely and desperate enough to spin an elaborate lie. Now, whenever I see her slipping out of the apartment around 6, I feel no panic. Because I know exactly where she's going, to her therapy group. Sometimes I even drive her there, or wait outside, or we plan a date right after her session ends. The relief in her eyes each time she leaves is palpable. No more lies to keep track of, no more times to adjust. She's found an honest path to healing, and I'm proud to walk it with her. Just last week, she told me she was thinking of returning to actual yoga classes soon, the real ones, as a supplementary form of relaxation. We laughed at the irony and decided that maybe we could do a couples yoga session once in a while. I can't help but smile at how far we've come. The memory of an empty yoga studio parking lot no longer haunts me. It's a testament to the obstacles we overcame and the freedom that honesty brings. And so, if someone were to ask me how I discovered my girlfriend's biggest secret, her mental health struggles hidden behind a false yoga schedule, I'd tell them it started with a glitch on her fitness tracker, a clue that gave me no choice but to question the reality she presented. In searching for the reason behind that broken timeline, we found a path to deeper intimacy. Our story proves that love can survive the worst storms when two people are willing to face the truth together. Yes, it hurt, but the healing that followed was worth every tear, every argument, every moment of fear. Because sometimes the biggest revelations arise from the smallest details, and those details can lead us to a place of compassion, understanding, and ultimately, a stronger bond than before.